Hi everyone, welcome to part 2. Okay, Alekhine's last move was knight d3, and Bogoljubov, you know, allows this d3 outpost, and he can now win back a pawn with rook takes a5. But this is the moment at which Alekhine began one of the huge conceptions that he was famous for creating at the chessboard. Here he played b4, which is interfering with the lines of communication between the queen and the rook, meaning that rook takes a5 is now threatened, and there are several ideas at work here. One is simply gaining both a passed pawn and control of the a file after, for example, queen a1, which Bogoljubov didn't go for. We can have a quick look at that though. If queen a1, now rook takes a5, queen takes a5, queen a8, and best play is undoubtedly queen takes a8 and rook takes a8, where black has a huge edge going into the endgame and should definitely win with correct play, so it's no surprise that Bogoljubov didn't choose this line. What he did play instead was rook takes a8, which surrenders the a file, but keeps the queens on the board, and in theory this should give greater drawing chances. However, at this moment Alekhine played the incredible b takes c3, which at this point Fritz gives as only equal, so in effect black has given up the advantage he's gained thus far in the game. But this is an example of human understanding, seeing deeper into the position strategically than a computer engine is capable of understanding. Fritz preferred queen takes a8, and there's certainly a good edge for black after, for example, queen b3 and queen a3, but Alekhine's decision creates a concrete strategy, that being that after b takes c3 and rook takes e8, black captures neither the rook on e8 nor the hanging knight on d2, but plays instead c2, remarkably allowing rook takes f8 check and going temporarily 2 rooks down, because after king h7 white has no way to prevent the c-pawn from queening, and naturally it's better not to lose a knight in the process, so here Bogoljubov played the only reasonable move, which is knight f2. If instead knight c3, then the queens would check and wins the knight. So now black, of course, has the queening of his c-pawn, which also forks the d2 knight because it's check. So knight f1 is forced, and also conveniently this defends the e3 pawn from the queen, and only now does Fritz agree with Alekhine's decision several moves earlier, recognizing that black's initiative is now winning, and the reasons for that will become clear in a second. 2 rooks are almost always stronger than a queen, so on the surface it would appear to be a counterintuitive decision to allow such an imbalance, but the positional factors are key here. Black has all the activity and play in the position, and in actual fact white will be forced to give up the exchange in a few moves' time. Here Alekhine played again the best move, which is knight e1, attacking the rook, which only has one square to move to, which is h2, and after queen takes c4, black has the decisive threat of bishop b5, and winning this pawn in the process is merely an added bonus, and the strength of this threat means that rook b8 is forced in order to defend, and this is how black wins the exchange. There is no other satisfactory defense. For example, if knight d2 and queen c1, threatening all manner of tactics, is completely winning for black. Another failed try is knight h3. Now bishop b5, knight g5 check, h takes g5, h takes g5, with check from the rook, king g6, and white's initiative peters out again with a huge edge to black. So rook b8 is the only move to defend against this ominous threat of bishop b5, which Alekhine played now, and is threatening mate on f1, and there's no way to avoid giving up the material. So Bogoljubov played rook takes b5 immediately. He could have played instead bishop g2, but now simply knight takes g2 forces rook takes b5 anyway. So rook takes b5 and queen takes b5, and presumably Alekhine had calculated at least this far when playing the key move b4 8 moves earlier, and of course black is completely winning here. White has a rook and a bishop against the queen, which is sometimes okay, but as before, it's the activity that makes the difference here, and the initiative, which is what black has. And Bogoljubov now played to undermine Alekhine's support of the e4 pawn with g4, and here Alekhine again shows a concrete forcing line with knight f3 check. Queen e2 was also very strong, but not as clear cut, and having gained a winning advantage, it makes sense to choose these forcing lines. So after knight f3 check, it's threatening to win the exchange, so bishop takes f3 is forced, and now e takes f3 and g takes f5, and Alekhine doesn't mind the loss of this pawn because now he has the brilliant queen e2, which completely ties up the white pieces and brings Bogoljubov ever closer to a lethal zugzwang. The f1 knight can't move, or the e3 pawn is falling, after which white will collapse, and the king is tied to defending the knight here on f1. And if the f2 knight moves, for example, to h3, now comes the incredible knight g4, where after rook takes e2, f takes e2 is winning because white cannot stop the e-pawn from queening. And playing instead knight h1 is also losing for the same reasons, knight g4. And rook h3 in the initial position at this stage, rook h3 or rook h1 is losing to the tactical shot, knight g4, where there's no knight takes g4 because of the mate on g2. And now queen takes f2 is threatened, so rook h2 would be forced, after which comes knight takes e3, knight takes e3, queen takes e3, with queen e1 check coming next, and a totally winning game for black. So there are no piece moves that white can make after Alekhine's queen e2, and as a result Bogoljubov is forced to advance and sacrifice pawns in order to try and hold out after this brilliant move, queen e2. So the first move that Bogoljubov played was d5, and if knight takes d5 here, then the white pieces are again able to move, which of course is undesirable for black. So he played king g8 here, and after h5 he played simply king h7. It's great play because Alekhine is waiting for the perfect moment to strike, which comes now with e4, which would have been forced sooner or later anyway. The only remaining option was d6, after which would have come simply c takes d6. So now knight takes e4, and it's completely crushing. After knight takes e4, which is forced, and queen takes c4, and the queen's going to collect up all of the loose white pawns before long, and as throughout the entire game, white is completely devoid of counterplay. The d and f pawns are forked by the queen now, so Bogoljubov decided to sacrifice them both. Here he played d6, playing instead rook d2, simply queen takes f5, and at this stage of the game Bogoljubov was probably completely demoralized and praying for a blunder. So d6 is what he played, c takes d6, f6, g takes f6, and now rook d2, hoping at last for some counterplay, but now came another superb move from Alekhine, again resulting in forcing lines that lead to a huge advantage, this time to a win. If you want to try and spot it, then stop the video now. Queen e2, was the move. Alekhine's second queen sacrifice of the game, which results in a completely one endgame after rook takes e2, which is probably a blunder in fact. And now f takes e2, and now in order to stop the queening, king f2 is forced. So e takes f1 check, which is Alekhine's third queen sacrifice of the game. King takes f1 can be played. And after the fireworks of the last 50 moves, we are left with only 7 men on the board, and Alekhine, of course, had calculated that the position is completely winning for black. Here he played king g7, and after king e2, king f7, and the king is coming to e6 decisively, after which there is no way to hold the white position. Play continued with king e3. If instead f5 to prevent king e6, simply king e7 is winning. For example, king d3, d5, king d4, king d6, king d3, king e5, and it's an easy win. So king e3, and now king e6, king e4, which is taking the opposition and preventing the black king from coming any further, but now comes, of course, d5 check. And here Bogoljubov finally resigned, seeing that, for example, after king d4, king f5 wins it for black. For example, king takes d5, king takes f4, and the king will escort the pawn to queen easily. So it was an incredible game from Alekhine. Many top players and writers give it as their favourite of all time, and it's easy to see why, with such superb and creative ideas from the great Russian world champion. We've got a bit of time left. We can have a quick replay with the threatened squares and the board flipped, so we can see what it's like to face such play from Alekhine. Here we go. So the Dutch defense from Alekhine, which, as I said, was quite unusual for him to play. And nowadays this bishop b4 check line is not considered that great. White scores very well against it. But Alekhine was famous, one of the earliest practitioners of home preparation, so perhaps this was something along those lines. It's impossible to know. But that was one of the ways that he was able to beat Capablanca, was with his preparation and his training. Capablanca had very few weaknesses in chess, but one of them was laziness and a lack of desire to prepare and learn opening variations and traps and all of that kind of thing. And Alekhine was able to take advantage of that in their great match. But winning the a4 pawn here is the first key moment that shows that black is gaining the advantage in the position, and this d3 outpost is fantastic for the knight as well. And here the first queen sacrifice, although strictly speaking is probably a rook sacrifice, but on chessgames.com the title of the game is the triple queen sacrifice, and so I think we'll call it a queen sacrifice. But I think the most instructive element of this game was a position here, where white is in zugzwang. Well, he's getting ever closer to zugzwang, and that's an extremely powerful principle of chess. If you can put your opponent in zugzwang, it's incredibly strong and incredibly annoying to play against if it happens. But it's obviously a very important feature of endgames, and something you should always bear in mind if you can put your opponent in zugzwang, or indeed if he can put you in zugzwang. So that's it anyway. A fantastic game from Alekhine, and I hope you enjoyed it. So please leave any comments or thoughts, and I'll be back soon with the next game. Thanks very much.